Hi guys, and welcome back to Fragile Bridges, where it's about keeping the dark reaches of the Mediaverse connected, from the past to the present, and the mainstream to the obscure. I'm your porter with the goods, Marcus, and today I have a very special delivery for you. Another package from the realm of gaming, and one whose influence on the industry is still felt 22 years later. For many people, it's a game that's seen as the holy grail of stealth action, and possibly video games as an entire medium. And of course, it's also a Hideo Kojima game. It's the 1998 timeless stealth action masterpiece, Metal Gear Solid.
The nuclear weapons disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago was attacked and captured by next-generation special forces, being led by members of Foxhound. They're demanding that the government turn over the remains of Big Boss, and they say that if their demands are not met within 24 hours, they'll launch a nuclear weapon. You'll have two mission objectives. First, you're to rescue DARPA Chief Donald Anderson and the president of Armstech, Kenneth Baker. Both are being held as hostages. Secondly, you're to investigate whether or not the terrorists have the ability to make a nuclear strike, and stop them if they do.
It's Snake. I'm in front of the disposal facility.
Snake. This is the end of the road for you.
It's hard to listen this close.
Now you're mine! I've been waiting for you, Solid Snake. I won't die as long as you still live.
Despite how badass that trailer is, it only captures a sliver of what made Metal Gear Solid so jaw-droppingly awesome when it was released in 1998. And after recently replaying it, it's still just as amazing now as it was then. But before we dive into the deepest depths of Metal Gear Solid, let's once again talk about its creator in a segment I like to now call Hideo Time. It seems that my channel has become the unofficial Koji Pro network the past few videos, but what can I say? I really enjoy talking about the man who stoked my love for video games. And since we've already discussed the peak years and the eventual Kojima stranding, I think it's the perfect time for some Hideo hindsight and to take a look at his early years in the industry, from the before time in the long, long ago of 1986. Despite Kojima's initial aspirations to become a film director, he would pursue a career in the video game industry, as he found himself spending much of his free time playing games and thought the new medium would offer more creative opportunities than movies. Upon joining Konami's MSX home computer division, he was tasked with creating a military action game. But due to the MSX's technical limitations, it couldn't handle complex frenetic shooter gameplay, so Kojima instead made the focus of the game avoiding detection rather than seeking action. And thus in 1987, Metal Gear was born, and it would perform well enough despite only being released in Japan and Europe to inspire a 1990 sequel titled Metal Gear 2: Solid Snake. Both titles would eventually be ported to the Super Nintendo for an American release, and though they're seen as classics now, they weren't met with much fanfare stateside back then. And so Kojima would spend the next 6 years helping produce small side projects while pouring himself into his visual novels, which were definite works of passion and ways for him to express his inner cinephile. Most notably are his cult hits like the 1992 extremely Blade Runner-esque Snatcher and the 1994 mecha film noir Lethal Weapon-inspired Police Knots. In 1995, though, the big project began, development of Metal Gear 3, which would be called Metal Gear Solid in part because the main character's name was Solid Snake, and that this would be the first 3D Metal Gear game, technically making the character models and environments solid. And though Kojima had shown off his cinematic penchants in his visual novels, MGS would be the first time it would be brought to a mainstream console action game. 3 years of development and a couple of adrenaline-inducing E3 trailers later, it was here. And as would become the norm for Kojima releases, Metal Gear Solid was being featured on the latest, hottest Sony console, at this point being the original PlayStation. And on October 21st, 1998, Metal Gear Solid released in America to rave reviews. It was a monumental, mind-blowing experience and a worldwide success. It was also the moment that would solidify Hideo Kojima's name in gaming history. And though I could continue reiterating how great MGS is, I just don't think it conveys how unanimously praised it was upon its release. To say Metal Gear Solid had almost unanimous 10 out of 10s across the board just doesn't quite do it justice, so let me read a few descriptions from reviews to make up for that. PlayStation Magazine UK said, "The best game ever made, unputdownable and unforgettable." IGN called it, "Closer to perfection than any other game in PlayStation's action genre, beautiful, engrossing, and innovative in every conceivable category." And Computer and Video Games gave it a truly apt description stating, "It's like playing a big-budget action blockbuster, only better." There's actually a funny meme I've seen on the internet that you don't need a controller for Metal Gear Solid, you need a bucket of popcorn. And yeah, it's kinda true, but in a fantastic sort of way. The first MGS was innovative in a lot of areas, using its insanely engrossing and detailed cutscenes that end with plot cliffhangers to keep the player motivated to continue and uncover more of the story. I have to say it did an excellent job of giving you fulfilling and still somewhat challenging gameplay that made the almost 20-minute at a time cutscenes feel truly earned, which helped create a feeling of investment in the characters and plot. As far as gameplay went, nobody had seen stealth action like this. The most stealthy move you could perform in games prior to Metal Gear Solid was crouch. But MGS added so many elements like luring guards, crawling, chokeholds and non-lethal stuns, and of course, hiding in a box. These mechanics, along with some of the incredible action set pieces, give a very inviting balance of being a total shinobi and living out your Terminator power fantasy. To this day, for myself, there are still no points of criticism toward Metal Gear Solid. It managed to excel in every cinematic way, from script and cutscenes to voice acting and soundtrack, while still injecting innovative gameplay that made it the status quo for the stealth action genre and cinematically the industry as a whole. And while 22 years has gone by and every MGS game in the franchise has earned decent to high marks, Metal Gear Solid 1 is still most often referred to when discussing the series' greatness and influence. Nowadays, the line between movies and games is so blurred, half the time when watching a trailer, you're unsure if it's for the latest AAA game or the next Hollywood blockbuster. And this shift in aesthetics throughout the industry is where Metal Gear Solid's influence has been felt the most. Stealth action games like Assassin's Creed, Splinter Cell, and Dishonored borrowed and innovated further on some of Metal Gear's stealth gameplay techniques. And while they do draw some comparisons to MGS, especially Splinter Cell, it's in their cinematic storytelling that you can feel the shadow of Metal Gear. These games, along with other AAA titles like Uncharted, The Last of Us, and God of War, to name a few, have the same grab your popcorn and buckle up for a Hollywood blockbuster feel Metal Gear Solid initially introduced us to. And while a lot of games are seen as innovative and have a mechanic or playstyle that's emulated and imitated by lesser games of its genre, rarely is a style, especially one for storytelling, so impactful that it's almost universally embraced across the industry. But that's what truly makes a work like Metal Gear Solid a game changer, whose film quality aspects not only withstand time, but continue to shape game design and visual storytelling to this day. And what better time to mention storytelling, because we must now prepare to travel the twist-filled, winding road of a Hideo Kojima plot. As always, this is your spoiler warning for the story and themes of the game, and while I'll briefly touch on some twists, I will try to keep this synopsis as bare bones as possible. Anyways, let's put on our sneaking suits and cardboard boxes and perform a tactical extraction of Metal Gear Solid's plot. You are covert operative Solid Snake, sent on a solo espionage mission into a nuclear disposal facility which has been taken over by terrorists threatening to launch a nuke, and your mission is to neutralize the insurgents, save the hostages, and stop the potential nuclear strike. And with only radio support to back you up, the odds are not in your favor. Shortly after infiltrating the base, you manage to locate a couple of high-profile hostages who both promptly die of heart attacks right after meeting you. So the whole rescue mission thing is not going well. You do, however, manage to team up with your colonel's niece, a rookie named Meryl, to periodically open fancy doors or mow down a cadre of enemy troops. And despite the budding chemistry between you two, there's no time for love to bloom on this battlefield, yet. Because you've discovered the terrorists are also in possession of a super top secret walking battle tank called Metal Gear Rex that they intend to launch the nuke with. And before you can even begin to deal with that mess, you're going to have to run the gauntlet. Because first there's a gunfight with a Russian cowboy who loses his hand to a cyborg ninja. Then it's one-on-one in the Arctic arena with a giant Abrams tank. Then the cyborg ninja shows back up, and you beat him so badly you crash his Wi-Fi. And now you guys are sort of friends. You then meet an anime-obsessed scientist named Otacon who created Rex, and to atone for his misappropriated science, he becomes your hacker sidekick. He monologues for quite a bit, spilling his heart about how horrible killing, war, and nuclear weapons are. And Snake really shows his empathy for this guy.
But that's all over now. I won't take part in murder anymore.
Whatever.
We don't care.
You team back up with Meryl to fight a dude with psychic powers who looks like the Gimp from Pulp Fiction. And after fighting his furniture and out-psyching him to death, your journey continues only to have Meryl picked off, forcing you into a duel with Sniper Wolf. You bullseye her a couple times, but then you and Meryl are promptly captured. And it was then that the two snakes came face to face with each other, as though their reflections were staring back at them, and this is what transpired.
Hey, who are you? I'm your clone. You're the real me. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I'm not me. I'm you. I'm you. Oh, you're me.
Okay, not quite, but you are told that Solid and Liquid Snake are clones of the greatest soldier ever, Big Boss. You know, the guy Snake killed in those Metal Gear games most of us never played. Also that you were injected with some super virus and are being used as a vector to kill specific people. Huh? What? Nothing? But no time to digest this because torture scene! You somehow break out of jail because storyline and reach the roof of the communications tower where Liquid awaits in a deadly Hind-D gunship to blow your ass to smithereens. So you give Liquid his ground control to Major Tom moment. Then it's time for another duel with Sniper Wolf. And yeah, I'm pretty sure there's not going to be a third. Then it is time to do battle with Vulcan Raven. So you do, and then you watch the birds devour his corpse. Gross. Finally, after trudging across the entire base, you reach the lair of Metal Gear Rex. You have to do some long-winded keycard stuff, and the shit truly hits the fan then, because now Metal Gear is active. And since Liquid is inside the giant murder mech, it's time for the Battle of the Clone Babies Round 2. And just when all hope seems lost, your robot friend shows back up to reminisce and make the ultimate sacrifice.
Hey there, did you know I had a robot friend? We used to laugh and play, but someone took him away. He was my 10 gigahertz old pal, my robot friend.
So now Snake is irrevocably pissed, and about 20 Stinger missiles later, you topple Rex in glorious pyrotechnic fashion. So it's all over, right? No, you have to fight Liquid, again. This time in hand-to-hand combat atop of Rex, but you quickly send his ass over the edge, plummeting to his death. Oh hey, Meryl's still alive. So you two hop in a jeep to escape, and as you approach daylight, Liquid is right on your ass because he's the goddamn T-1000 and just won't die. A few more bullets to his face, and after a little 60-mile-an-hour car wreck later, he somehow has you dead to rights. But remember that super virus I mentioned they injected you with to kill certain people? Yeah. So after surviving a helicopter wreck, being blown out of a giant mech, falling 3 stories, taking machine gun fire directly to the face, and then walking away from a fiery car crash, Liquid finally dies of a heart attack.
No! Dude! No fucking way!
But then you and Meryl have a nice philosophical talk about not letting your genes define your life and who you are, and you ride off into the sunrise of an uncertain, yet hopeful future. The end. Well, gang, we've made it across yet another Kojima plot bridge. And I think the only thing to say after a storyline like that is, wow. Which brings us to an underrated aspect of Metal Gear Solid I think also has the wow factor, and that would be its soundtrack. Unlike later Metal Gear Solid games which attracted famous composers like Harry Gregson Williams, Noriko Hibno, and Ludwig Forssell, one question always eluded me in regards to the first album. Who composed this music? Because it's fantastic. And until researching for this video, I had no clue who was responsible for one of the best game soundtracks of the PlayStation 1 era. And it turns out it was actually an in-house group effort, as the score was composed and performed by the Konami Computer Entertainment Sound Team of Japan, which is made up of 5 or 6 people I've never heard of, and that there's virtually no information for on the internet. But their work speaks for itself, with composition styles of tense industrial synth and electronic beats, highlighted by choir chants along with orchestral drums and strings when tensions are at their peak. It certainly added to the grim military cathedral mood of Shadow Moses Island. But the soundtrack truly comes alive during the inadvertent encounters with guards and the oh-so-memorable boss fights. Highlights of the score for me being the songs Encounter, which is currently playing, Hind D, Escape, and the ending theme, The Best Is Yet to Come, masterfully performed by Aoife Nyari. I really fell in love with this album as a kid, and I think I have an even greater appreciation for it now, as I've wondered if the bar hadn't been set so high from the beginning, if we would have got the same awe-inspiring soundtracks in Kojima's works that followed. But if you'd like to revisit this pulse-pounding soundtrack, Metal Gear Solid's entire album can currently be listened to on YouTube. Now, despite all these reasons that Metal Gear Solid still holds up 22 years later, our emerging remake culture has led to a myriad of discussions about a possible Metal Gear Solid remake. And I think some people forget there already was one. So let's take a quick gander at the 2004 GameCube exclusive titled Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. In my last video about a potential Max Payne remake, I briefly touched on the 2004 reimagining of Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, and what happens when the original creative development team decides not to lead the remake. And while Twin Snakes had a much more polished visual look and utilized the gameplay enhancements that made Metal Gear Solid 2 such a technical achievement, Kojima handing over directorial duties to film director Ryuhei Kitamura kinda killed the game, because Kitamura's style of super over-the-top did not translate well to a Metal Gear Solid game. Scenes that once seemed suspenseful and very entertaining had pretty much become self-parody cringe. I mean, there's not much more I can say about Twin Snakes. The gameplay design is better, and the story is exactly the same as the original. But my god, those cutscenes.
Okay.
I don't even blame Kitamura completely, because Kojima reviewed all the cutscenes and had final say. And while maybe he thought a marriage of his seminal work and one of his favorite quirky directors would mesh, it just wasn't a solid match. Pun completely intended. And for that reason, I give Twin Snakes a middling 7 out of 10. And while a remastering of Metal Gear Solid would still be awesome, I'm perfectly fine with my imperfect, perfect original. But with 2 slightly different versions of the game already out, how much more originality could be injected into Metal Gear Solid? Well, we would eventually find out in 2008 when it would receive its own novel adaptation. Yes, that's right, there's a Metal Gear Solid book. And just how the game played like a Hollywood blockbuster, the book reads like one, with Snake even handing out cheese-tastic one-liners before most of his stealthy kills. One of my favorite being this passage. The man snored loudly and woke himself up. "Sounds like you got sleep apnea," Snake said. "Better get that checked out." Snake reached out, grabbed the man's skull through the hood, and twisted it all the way around. I mean, it's just so Schwarzenegger-esque.
Stick around.
And author Raymond Benson, who's also written a number of James Bond novels, along with other video game adaptations like Hitman and Splinter Cell, really did Metal Gear Solid justice. As someone who's clearly played the game, I had no problem envisioning everything he describes in the book. He also added depth to some of the intense firefights and boss battles that take place by showing us what goes through Snake's mind in combat, having him mentally flash back and draw on the training and battle philosophies he learned years ago as a young Foxhound recruit. It gives another layer to Snake's character, background, and emotions that we've never fully experienced in the games. However, I think what made it such a fun read was the graceful balance of action and comedy throughout. And no part of the book gave me a bigger laugh or was a better homage to the game than when Snake stumbles upon a large cardboard box and quickly hops in to evade detection. I found myself chuckling while giving an approving fist pump of excitement that they managed to make a goofy staple of the franchise work in book form. The only thing that was missing was a guard walking up to it and saying, "Mr. Box." This is the first time I've read a book based on a video game, and I thoroughly enjoyed Benson's style and his retelling of Metal Gear Solid's events. And since he also wrote an adaptation for Metal Gear Solid 2, I'll definitely be checking out more of his work in the future. But for the reasons I've listed, I give Metal Gear Solid the novel a 10 out of 10. And I think whether you're a fan of the game or just like books that read like Hollywood blockbusters, you should try to get a copy of Metal Gear Solid. Currently it can be found for purchase on Amazon.com. Now this is normally the part where I hit you with some Kojima social commentary, but because I really wanted to focus on Metal Gear Solid's influence and staying power, and that the social theme of genetic fate is so cumbersome, I'm going to be saving that social message for a future delivery. But let's at least complete the last leg of this journey as we've arrived at the conclusion. From cinematics that would change gaming forever and an insanely meta twist-filled plot, to innovative stealth mechanics that defined a genre and blockbuster-style action, Metal Gear Solid was and still is the perfect video game. And whether its medium be video games, books, or film, which there is a movie adaptation on the way, it's an entertaining story through and through that has and continues to withstand the test of time. And if there's one thing I'm certain of, it's that many games would not have the same motion picture flair and breathtaking presentation we take for granted now if Metal Gear Solid had not paved the way back in 1998. And it's for these numerous reasons I give Metal Gear Solid an uproarious 10 out of 10. If it's not obvious, I highly recommend going back to play or replay the original Metal Gear Solid. If it's your first time, your mind will still be blown, and if you're replaying, it'll bring back all sorts of good nostalgic memories from past playthroughs. Honestly, I can't even tell you where to get a copy at this point. Amazon, eBay, your local retro game store, but yeah, if you can find a copy, get it. Wow. We made it through the Metal Gear Solid experience, and I only hope I did it justice. While this was definitely the most cumbersome delivery to date, it was one of the most fulfilling as well. Replaying MGS, watching cringy Twin Snake cutscenes, and reading the book for this breakdown reminded me of what made Metal Gear Solid so magical for me as a kid. I got to see that magic still has some Alakazam to it today. Before we go though, I'd like to know, what was your first Metal Gear Solid experience like? And what are some titles that maybe changed your perception of gaming growing up? Thank you once again for joining me on the astral trek through the mediaverse that is Fragile Bridges. Your time, support, and feedback are truly appreciated here. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos, but I've got to get back to keep on keeping on with keeping us connected. As always, I'm your porter with the goods, Marcus, and I'll see you on the other side of the bridge.